True Freedom, the title of our meditation on our scriptures for this fifth Sunday after Pentecost. What's the key to happiness and fulfillment? Well, let me tell you, the magazines on the rack at Myers have all the answers. Glossy photos and bold headlines have the latest scoop. Or go to Amazon and you can find any number of books to learn the most recent research on eating the right foods, combined with the newest exercise program, Zumba or Pilates or hot yoga, P90X, boot camp, and more. Facebook ads urge us to enroll right away for that course revealing the secret to being your best self. We are forever beguiled by the promise that the one who holds the key, who knows the secret, that those who are wise, intelligent, and informed, to these life's oyster opens and all manner of pearls await. Yet when we turn to the bestseller of all time, the Holy Scriptures, we find a twist on the usual formula. In our gospel text, Jesus tells us that God has hidden these things from the wise and intelligent and revealed them to infants. A hidden truth. Well, to understand this intriguing remark, we need to take a look at our gospel passage. In this scene, Jesus observes a series of complaints circulating in the crowd. John came, neither eating nor drinking, and they say, he has a demon. And the Son of Man came, eating and drinking, and they say, look, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. John the Baptist lived a sparse and ascetic life, and he was criticized. And then Jesus came, having table fellowship with the humble poor and the poor in spirit, and he was criticized. In other words, John the Baptist comes along and doesn't conform to popular opinion. He's too reclusive, he's too much of a loner, he's too somber and serious, say the critics. He should eat and drink more. And then Jesus shows up and he's just too much the opposite. And the complaints are he eats and drinks too much and with the wrong kind of people. Any of this sound familiar? Oh my goodness, nothing I ever do is enough. I can't get it right. Ever heard that from someone? Ever felt that way yourself? It doesn't matter how much you do, what you say, what you don't say, how much you pay, how much you save, how much you exercise. It never seems to be enough. Well, it's kind of hopeful to have Jesus acknowledge this miserable reality. While we continue to exhaust ourselves by trying clever ways to improve ourselves or please others, Jesus suggests that we have it all backwards. In fact, trying so hard only adds to the pressure. We're surrounded by illusory promises. Buy this product, use this tool, visit this establishment, embrace this experience, meet this person, then you'll be okay. But we'll never be good enough, clever enough, attractive enough, anything enough, not to the world around us and not even for ourselves. We're haunted by the specter of never measuring up. We're forever subject to the judgments of others and bedeviled by our own inner critic. We can't win. We find good company in Brother Paul. He offers himself as an example, as one who spent much of his life studying everything he could get his hands on, obeying every commandment put before him, following every ritual. He was determined and he was successful by Pharisaical standards. But as he admitted, it was never enough. I can will what is right, but I cannot do it, he said. And he wanted so badly to possess the key, to know the secret, to fulfill all the demands, to arrive. Wretched man that I am, he said, who will save me? Wretched creatures that we are, we seek to make ourselves acceptable to ourselves and to others by living up to the exhausting demands of the surrounding culture or to the legalistic demands of whatever we're worshiping. In today's passage, Jesus is talking to those who are seeking a life-giving relationship with God. And he's calling to himself the religiously exhausted, the legalistically addicted, those who, like Paul, have tried all the usual ways of finding some peace and have only achieved frustration. He calls to us, who would be his disciples, saying, "Come to me, all you who are weary and carrying those heavy burdens. Take my yoke upon you, and you will find rest." Now, in choosing the metaphor of the yoke, Jesus is drawing on an image well known in Mediterranean culture. For a team of oxen to work well together, it was important that a yoke be crafted out of wood that was lightweight and sanded smoothly, that was crafted based on measurements accurate for the animal's size. And the yoke was an image for the law of Moses, together with the 613 commandments added by the religious community, describing in detail the ways to please God. The yoke of the Pharisees was this teaching, with their demands that you have to do this and this and this exactly right in order to matter to God, in order to be acceptable, in order to be significant or worthy of love. This kind of yoke, Jesus rejects. This yoke of seeking God by keeping the rules, by doing what someone or anyone or everyone else says is the thing to do, by getting it right all the time and so living constantly in fear of getting it wrong. This is the kind of yoke that leads those who wear it to labor and be heavy laden. It leads to an exhaustion in what Paul called this body of death. It leads to a life of fearful obedience where the spirit is deadened and where any measure of success is more likely to lead you into the isolation of self-righteousness than into the heart of God. And when you think about it, to say to your child or friend or your spouse, "I will only love you if you do right," is to ensure a twisted and toxic relationship, one that hurts everyone involved. But the yoke of the law, at its worst, did just that. And Paul struggled under these demands and discovered that this yoke didn't fit. It didn't bring him any closer to God either. Yokes like this never do. And in response to all this, Jesus says, "Come to me." Not to a new law or a new teaching or a secret interpretation, not to a book or a list of do's and don'ts, but to Jesus. Come to Jesus himself. Enter into a relationship that's based on love and forgiveness and blessing. It's freedom to realize that God's presence with you and God's love for you are never the result of endless striving. We are already loved by God. And since we are loved, because we are loved, Jesus calls us into relationship, a relationship with him and with the community that continues Jesus' life and ministry, the church. Jesus taught that all the commandments are kept by loving God and loving our neighbor. This is the yoke of Christ. And since this yoke has to do with these commandments to sacrificial love, we find that this yoke is shaped very much like a cross. What Jesus reveals to us in hanging on a cross is a God who bears our burdens with us. God is the one who shows up in the midst of our neediness and our failure. God is the one who comes alongside of us, who joins us in our vulnerability, and nothing demonstrates this more than the cross. God willing to embrace all of our frail human life, even to the point of death, in Jesus. And in him we see God's profound love and commitment to us will not be deterred by anything. This God who bears our burdens with us is not necessarily what we would want. We'd prefer a God who would take away all our problems rather than one who helps us cope with them. We'd like a God who eliminates challenges, but instead we have a God who equips us to deal with them. We'd like to have a God who overcomes our opponents rather than being one who enables us to make peace with them. This is the loving God we need. We live in a culture that celebrates the individual, where we are taught to believe that we find fulfillment through only self-discovery, self-expression, and being true to oneself. And while there's great value in that kind of authenticity, it's only one half of the total picture. We discover our identity when we also place ourselves in relationship with others, in bearing the burdens of those around us. God has a way of showing up in the need of our neighbor, in the face of the person who believes and thinks differently than we do. And yet, our call as disciples of Jesus is to meet them where they are, care for them, and accept them as we are able. It would seem that God keeps showing up where we'd least expect God to be, calling us to discover ourselves as we turn to meet the other, to find our lives by giving them away. We are called to this new yoke, not to a law or a set of rules, but to Jesus. And in partnership with him, he invites us to love and serve the humanity that he came to save. And in this relationship with him, we find our richest fulfillment, our deepest satisfaction. And paradoxically, it's when we allow ourselves to be captured by the love of Christ that we find ourselves set free. Jesus said, "Come to me if you seek God, if you seek life, and I will give you rest." Amen.